OnePlus just recently released a new phone model, and rumors have it that it's a bit of a downgrade from its last release. The OnePlus 10T was released to the public this past August, and in terms of the specs, there are some features not found in the OnePlus 10 Pro, but it's also a more affordable phone for the everyday user. However, does the cheaper price of the OnePlus 10T make it a better phone, or is it actually a high quality phone even without the bells and whistles? As I've owned and used both models with me, I have spent quite a bit of time using them daily, and you all know exactly what to expect when choosing between the two models. As always, this video is not sponsored, so you know very well it's going to be an honest review from me through and through. Stick around until the end because once the dust has settled, I'll give you my overall review and recommendation. Should you go all out and get the 10 Pro, or will the 10T be enough to satisfy a good phone craving? Let's find out, shall we? Having a detailed review of the phones in these categories can help you make the right choice when buying a phone. This includes the design and handling, screen and display, performance, camera, battery life, and price. Because these phones look so similar, I will always keep the 10T on the left side and the 10 Pro on the right of the screen to make it easier for you guys. And I'm going to score these phones as I go through the video just because I like me some competition. The first point I will make is that I prefer the matte finish on the OnePlus 10 Pro compared to the glittery black on the 10T. This is just a personal preference, but the 10 Pro seems more professional in terms of color choices. 10T has another jade green option, while 10 Pro has the emerald forest. On the back of the 10 Pro, you will get the Hasselblad branding camera, but the quad setup for the lenses remains the same on both. Design-wise, there's not really much of a difference. There is a noticeable change on the side of the phone though, and that's the absence of the alert slider on the 10T. In my previous video where I reviewed the 10T, I did give my thoughts on the absence of the alert slider, so make sure to check that video out. I'll link it in the description below. But if it truly matters to you, the 10 Pro will be a better preference. When we take a look at the hole punch, the 10 Pro has it on the left, while the 10T is centered. Personally, I prefer the hole punch to be centered. Maybe it's just because I'm accustomed to it, but the status bar looks cleaner with the icons on the left. At the top and bottom of the phones, you will notice that the 10 Pro shows the antennas, while it's not noticeable in the 10T. OnePlus says that they have restructured the antenna systems in the 10T to improve the connectivity to avoid blind signal angles for their new release. The design for the speakers on both phones are very similar. As with the volume control and the sound, there's also not much of a difference. Our smartphones are one of the most evolved tech in the last decade, and it has gotten to a point where When we compare both phones laying on a flat surface, the 10T sits slightly taller. The 10 Pro screen is narrower, making it a sleeker option and a more comfortable feel when just using one hand. The 10 Pro is also 3 grams lighter, so carrying around in your hand or in your pocket feels slightly more seamless. Moving on to the screens, I prefer the 10T's flat screen compared to the curved display on the 10 Pro. As many can attest to it, viewing angles and screen interaction is better with the flat screen. I occasionally notice some unintentional clicks on the screen, which is the downside to having a curved display. You will also notice the change in the text display. Because of how the 10T screen is, texts are more visible. Note, the font size is the same on both phones, yet the 10T is winning in terms of visibility. As for the bezels, the 10 Pro is slimmer on the sides than the 10Ts because of the curved display difference. However, the top bezels are just the same. There's not much of a difference here. As for the display resolutions, the OnePlus 10 Pro has the 1440p screen resolution with an LTPO panel, while the 10T comes with a 1080p AMOLED screen. Honestly, to the naked eye, you're never going to tell which screen is better than the other if you keep them together. You can barely see the difference at first glance. However, if you really examine it, 10 Pro has a slight hue of blue. With that, I prefer 10T's resolution that is leaning more to white hue. Both the screens get a 120Hz refresh rate, but 10 Pro's refresh rate can drop to 1Hz, while 10T's won't drop below 60Hz via the LTPS panel. So with the 10 Pro, you can possibly save more battery life, which I will talk about in a bit. As for the brightness, the 10 Pro has slightly better nits of brightness than the 1080p screen on the 10T. But then again, it's not something you all notice, so there's really not much of a difference here, but I will give it here to the 10 Pro only for the numbers. The performance on the phones is very similar. OnePlus phones are known to be fast and lag-free. With either phone you get, you'll be satisfied with its overall performance. But I will give it here to the 10T for packing the latest Snapdragon 8 Plus chip. Now, let's talk about the memory options. In the OnePlus 10T, you can choose between 8GB or 16GB, while in the Pro, you can only choose between 8GB or 12GB. Although, I've used both these phones with moderate to heavy use, I have not experienced any lag on either. Both phones support Face ID, fingerprint, PIN, and pattern unlock features. With the fingerprint and face unlock, both phones have been really accurate too, with no issues at all. I never experienced a situation where I had any issues unlocking the phone, although I'll always be skeptical of the security of the face unlock. I do love the speed though, at which you are able to unlock the phone with such ease. When we look at the camera, I have tested these phones out extensively, and I have a slightly mixed opinion. To the regular consumer, you're not going to find much difference between the 10T and the Hasselblad branded 10 Pro. In some comparisons, or maybe a little more obvious at that, you will find the 10 Pro slightly superior, but in general, if both are in perfect light conditions, both of them perform very well. I found that photos with the Pro looked more natural, while the 10T's picture processing made the photos look a little more vivid. The wide-angle camera on the 10 Pro performs better than the 10T. Also, pictures taken at night were better used with the 10 Pro, as the 10T just struggled to focus when it's dark or if there was limited lighting. So if I'm being completely honest, the 10 Pro has a slightly better camera than the 10T. And if you're someone who values taking high quality pictures, I did say the safe bet would be to go for the 10 Pro. The battery life in both these phones have been very good in moderate to heavy use for the past few weeks. On paper, both these phones have similar battery performance. They both definitely deserve a spot in my books for one of the best ranking battery performing phones this year. But if you're curious, I end most of my day with still 30% of battery charge on both phones. Although, in terms of numbers, the 10 Pro has a slightly bigger pack of 5000 mAh, but the slightly smaller 4800 mAh on the 10T balances out with its 1080p screen. The most impressive part with any OnePlus phone is the wired charging speeds they offer, and of course, these phones are no exception. The 10 Pro supports 65 watts of fast wired charging, and while that is already very fast, the 10T offers a crazy charging speed of 125 watts. I still haven't gotten used to how fast the battery charges in just 10 minutes, and I get a full days of use from it on either of these phones. The downside for 10T is that unlike the 10 Pro, it lacks the wireless charging capabilities. But honestly, with these crazy wired charging speeds and battery life, I don't miss it. It barely even is a criteria if you ask me. You will rarely spend time charging if you go with either models. The difference in pricing between the two phones is $220 here in the US if you compare spec to spec in terms of the memory and storage options. The OnePlus 10T starts at $649 and you can get the best RAM and storage option at that price. The OnePlus 10T Pro starts at $799 for 8GB and 128GB of memory, and to bump up the memory, you will have to pay an additional $70, which is not too bad. In my honest and humble opinion, the spec difference that I mentioned won't really affect most regular consumers. Regardless of what you end up choosing, both are ideally great phones. If you're that OnePlus fan who appreciated the 2014 phones where they were focused so much on speed and performance rather than the camera, the OnePlus 10T is a better option you can relate to. The flat screen, the faster charging speeds, the latest chip, and a better RAM and memory for a lesser price makes it a solid phone investment that all lasts you for a good few years. But if paying an extra $220 is not an issue with you, and if you want to own for the last time a OnePlus phone to ever have an alert slider, go for the Pro. A slightly better performing camera is also a reason to go for the 10 Pro if you're a camera nerd. But in my opinion, the additional money you spend doesn't justify the extra spec offering of the 10 Pro, but that's just me. Overall, the 10T meets all my daily needs, and with a slightly cheaper price, it's a great option that I would recommend to my internet friends here on YouTube. What do you think? Which phone would you go for? The 10T or the 10 Pro? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any additional questions about either of these phones, comment below and I will try to respond to you. This is Ben from Technologically Curious, and please make sure if you're new to this channel to subscribe, as it really encourages me to create more tech content like this. And until then, I'll see you soon.